Hello, listeners. Yes, there's a storm brewing, and this weekend we're aiming to put the power out. And there may be a little bit of brains involved. But you'll have to listen to find out what that means. And keep listening, and if you can guess this music that's playing in the background right now, we will give you a shout out on the very next episode of our show. Now, tonight, we have a very special guest from another football podcast joining us, and he's very knowledgeable. Unfortunately, he's a Port Adelaide supporter, but we won't hold that against him for tonight. So let's hit that theme music now. Hello, listeners, and welcome to round 15. This weekend, we have a match at 1:45 Eastern States time against the Port Adelaide Power at the Adelaide Oval, which has been sometimes a happy hunting ground for us and other times it hasn't. Joining me to discuss the selections and whatnot and everything else is my usual co-host, Al McGovern. Welcome, Al.
Ash, how are we?
Good, mate, good. Finally, had a win with technology with a little bit of heartache, but we're here.
A rare win for you.
Hey, mate, I'm a boomer. What can I say? And joining us tonight, we have a very special guest, probably the most famous of our guests so far, I would say. We have Adam from the Down the Guts Footy podcast. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this. I haven't been on another podcast before, so hopefully I fit in.
No, I think you'll be right. Other than your choice of footy team, but we'll just wait till after the game and see who gives it to each other.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Oh, Adam, well, before we get underway, why don't you tell us a little bit about your show and a little bit about yourself and who you follow and that sort of thing?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-hosts of the Down the Guts podcast. We like to have a look at like the whole league. We try and find the storylines and the narratives and put our discussions around that. And we have a few little fun things, like we have our MVP and we do our tiers system where we kind of rank the teams and stuff. So if you're a supporter of any club, we expect that you'll get some content from us. And why I enjoy this podcast is, well, I'm a Port Adelaide supporter, so it's going to be fun tonight to talk about Port Adelaide, because I like to try, the bias is there, but I try and be neutral, although it does come out from time to time. So it's going to be good to not have to be so neutral.
Yeah, I did. In your latest episode, I did. I was interested to have a listen to see what your thoughts were going to be after Port's loss to the Giants on the weekend, and I did notice that you were a little bit despondent.
Well, I was there, so obviously I got to see it firsthand. The trip itself was amazing, and I think I said it on my podcast, but I'll say it here as well. If you are going to do a footy trip, don't cross GWS off as one of the destinations, because the crowd was good, the entertainment that they put into that venue was amazing. But that's probably where my joy stopped, because I was sitting there and GWS, to their credit, outplayed Port Adelaide.
Yeah, it was one of those games too where there wasn't a lot of accurate kicking for goal, which is something we're used to at the Brisbane Lions. That's for sure.
That's pretty on brand for us.
Don't worry, at Port Adelaide, we're pretty much the same. But at least both clubs were doing it this time rather than just Port missing goals. But I don't know. It was bitterly cold. Like, it was freezing out there. I don't know if players couldn't feel their hands, and that's why they couldn't kick straight. I couldn't see a reason outside that there was a force field around the goals, but for some reason it wasn't a great game for the neutral, I have to admit.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched that game, so I only looked at the scores on the AFL app, and I thought, yeah, I feel for you guys because we know exactly how this feels.
Oh yeah, I think going with the
Yeah.
cold's probably the best opportunity you have for an excuse.
Yeah,
No, it was a missable game.
yeah. Well, and very interesting as well because one of your star players got himself suspended for a week, but then got himself off, which that's Zach Butters for those who are unawares. And I always thought he was going to get off based on precedent with what Jesse Hogan did earlier in the season as well. What were your thoughts? Were you a bit nervous about that?
I was a bit with you actually. I wasn't concerned about that one as much because, as we'd seen in previous weeks, that seems to have been given a week and then you go to the tribunal and it's been cleared. I would have been surprised if that had gotten a week and it didn't. But also, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Charlie Dixon got 3 weeks in the sandfall as well. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
not going to be seeing him for a little while.
yeah. I that was going to be the next thing I brought up. Mind you, I brought it up on our last episode. One of the social media outlets reported that he got suspended in the VFL, which was interesting. But uh,
We're
yeah,
used to that in South Australia.
oh mate, I live in Victoria, and I have like fought and fought and fought to defend the honour of the Victorian media, but this year since doing this podcast, has gotten the better of me, and they are shocking.
Well, I do have to admit, I also live in Victoria. So I
Ah,
have converted over the border. Joe and I, both South Australians, but it's at heart. We both live over here now. So, yeah, it is one of those things where there is biases both ways. Like you get back to South Australia, you listen to the local radio station, and the hatred for Victoria in a lot of ways is very, very strong. But then I can see, like, and you guys go for the Brisbane Lions, so you'd feel it as well, that
Of course.
outside of Victoria can be a bit of a blind spot for the AFL at times. So
Yes,
hopefully it's going
definitely
to
agree.
become more and more neutral. But yeah, it can be a bit of a blind spot.
yeah. I grew up in Western Australia, and up until well, I was 1986, so I was 11 years old. So I'm showing my age here. I got 10 minutes of the VFL every week. On Saturday night, they showed 10 minutes of highlights. And basically, anytime there was a state of origin or anything like that on, all we heard about was kick a Vic and go kick their asses and Victorians suck and all that. And I briefly lived in Hope Valley in Adelaide for a while as well. And it was even worse there.
Oh, jeez.
It is a bit of a little brother syndrome, I feel sometimes, and you know, yeah, I remember back in the day that was very much the sentimentality of the state, especially like when the Crows were coming up as well, and they won those back flags at the time. It felt like it was a win for South Australia. If I had known for the next 25 years, I'd be hearing about those premierships still as a reason why to discredit Port. I might not have wanted the Crows to win as badly as I did at the time.
Yeah, it was a really big thing. You know, they won the back to back, but yeah, you coached by a South Australian legend that wasn't Graham Corns. It was somebody a little bit more legendary.
Yes.
um, but also
Yeah.
like, you know, your best, or not yours, but their best player in both of those games was a guy who wasn't a Victorian as well, in Andrew McLeod, who's one of my favourite all-time players. I think
Oh yeah.
everybody who knows me knows that. So
He's a Port Adelaide Magpie player too.
yeah, there you go. And yeah, that was a huge thing. And I remember I was not long in Victoria at that stage, and yeah, the first one sitting in a room full of Victorians. I had a barbecue at my house, and the whole place just was. You could hear a pin drop, and there was not one Saints fan in the house that day either. It's just everybody was
Yeah, which
barracking
also
against.
makes.
So go on.
I was just going to say that, like, I look back at those premierships, and since I've been in Victoria, obviously, I mean, I was in Victoria but didn't go to the game. My family had travelled over for the 2007. You saw the build up for that with Geelong. You saw the Western Bulldogs, drought breaking. You saw Richmond. I really think the drought breaking for Richmond had a huge effect on that game because the Crows have been the best team all year. That I think if the St Kilda, next time they're in a grand final, if they're playing an interstate team, it will be insane here. And I reckon the whole state might get St Kilda over the line. And I just hope it's not against Port Adelaide or the Brisbane Lions in your case.
Thanks, mate.
Oh, yeah. I don't think either of us want to be the guys who support the club that broke that drought, do we?
Well, we've already done it with Geelong, so someone else can take the hit.
Yeah, I must admit, in 2007, I was moving house on the day of the grand final, and I did not watch it live. I ended up watching it later because everybody said to me, "You've got to watch this. It's unbelievable." And I didn't even know the scores for about probably 8 hours after the game. But once I did know them, wow.
Yeah, it was kind of unbelievable, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Probably too
Thanks
painful
for bringing up
memories.
these memories,
I was
guys.
going to say too painful to bring up. Probably bad timing.
Hey,
Can we talk about 2004 yet?
Well, I was just about to say, for us, only 3 years earlier, we were on the other end of Byron Pickett and Gavin Wanganeen, two absolute champions of the game as well. And it was a little bit of sweet revenge for us.
It'd be better if it was,
You guys weren't the only ones.
Yeah, I can imagine the Crows fans and probably the Adelaide Advertiser would have rejoiced in that result as well.
You know what's funny though?
Yeah, well, we call.
Oh, sorry, go on, Adam.
No, I was going to say we call it the Crow-tizer because, and especially recently, it is just crow after crows after crows. And I don't know how much you've listened to our podcast. Obviously, Joe is a Crow supporter, and my wife is a Crow supporter.
And your son.
Yes, I think, and my youngest son, my eldest son goes for Port, but my youngest son goes for the Crows. And so I watch the Crows way too much in my house. I can't escape it. But yeah.
Geez, showdowns would be interesting in your house.
Well, we actually, this is a funny story. So we actually had an article written about our family after the latest, or before the latest showdown.
Yeah.
So there was a picture of my two boys that had been taken during gather round, and obviously one Port and one Crows. And they got in contact with us and did a little interview about our family. And there has been some tough moments, probably not recent times. I mean, the Crows have got us a few times, but the Motlop goal to win the game, obviously the Jordan Dawson after the siren still gives me nightmares. But yeah, it can get a bit interesting. But now what happens is Danny, my wife, and my son Arthur go over to Joe's house and spend it with him and his kids and his wife. So the Crows get to go enjoy it together, and the Port people get to enjoy it together as well. So that's how, of recent times, how we've separated.
That's a good way to work it out. Everyone's happy.
Yeah. So it's not a bad way
Everyone
to do
can
it.
be.
So in my family, we're all Lions supporters except for my oldest son, who's a Freo supporter. And we've never had the luxury of going to a Brisbane and Freo game. So, we've never had any real issues. But he's not really into footy much anymore now that he's an adult. He's got other pursuits he chases.
Yeah. It's we're talking about the grand finals.
What's
before.
the last ever?
Sorry,
yeah,
Adam.
I was going to just ask, what was the last game Fitzroy ever played? Wasn't it against Fremantle?
That's correct. Yeah, over there because they had to make them play right across the other side of the country. Even though Freo and the West Australia Football Commission offered for the game to be transferred back to Victoria. But I'll look, credit to the Dockers. They did do a lot of good stuff for Fitzroy that day, but not so much the AFL or Ross Oakley.
Yeah, that was a bit ridiculous, wasn't it?
Yeah. I didn't get to go to that game, but I went to the previous week at the MCG against Richmond, and let me tell you, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, I can't imagine how emotional that experience would have been, mate.
And then seeing Matthew Richardson jumping up and down like a clown on a pogo stick after Richmond won by 100 and something points, when every other Richmond player was consoling the Fitzroy boys, and this one clown was just carrying on like he just won the premiership.
Yeah.
I held a grudge against him for a long time, but I have mellowed a bit.
It's only been a couple of decades.
It actually took listening to him get interviewed on another podcast and hearing that he's actually a pretty good bloke to convince me. So, yeah, there you go.
He would have been very young at the time, wouldn't he?
Probably about 25, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. We're talking about the grand finals before, and obviously, we touched on the 2004 grand final, but it's funny because, as bad as that was for us, I still don't really hold any resentment against Port for that. I mean, I know a lot of people do and all of that, but Collingwood still, I mean, even we beat them for 2 flags in a row, and I still hated them way more than I hated Port for beating us. It's funny how that works out.
I feel like the Brisbane Port Adelaide rivalry is one of the lost rivalries in the AFL. Maybe it's because I'm of that generation, like when that 2001 to 2004 period where Port and Brisbane were neck and neck. Obviously, Brisbane got the better of us a few times. Like I was in high school at the time, and those games were so good. Like I remember a 2-point win against Brisbane, just those teams going at each other all day. And if you actually watch the 2004 grand final, it's probably the last brutal grand final.
Yeah.
Because obviously
right.
Alistair Lynch was swinging, Jonathan Brown hit Josh Carr with a hook. And it was probably the last real physical like grand final, not just at the ball, but at the man as well. So I think it's a real of its era, but I still think that Port Brisbane rivalry, although we haven't been on the best end of it of recent times, was kind of a lost rivalry in the AFL.
It feels like Port and Brisbane games, no matter how the two teams are performing at the time, it's always a pretty fiery contest. Like it's always fairly close. I know there's been a couple of blowouts, and we haven't been particularly doing very well. The last couple of years we've been doing pretty well, but in the Leppich era and the late Boss era, we weren't doing too great, and early Fagan. But even in those games we did versus Port, it felt like they were still like we still did pretty well. Like it was good fiery contest. Like it wasn't boring. It was always really exciting to watch us play Port through all of those years.
Yeah, and if you look back at those games and the players, especially in those early 2000s games, like they were just, I mean, Voss, Lappin, Ackermanis, and who have I missed there?
Black.
Voss, Ackermanis, and Black. Sorry,
I
believe me, I really like Simon Black as a player. And then, going up against what Port Adelaide had at the time, they just match up so well. Very similar types in terms of, aggression as well as some outside run. And Warren Treadrow was at the peak of his powers. But, it gets forgotten, I think, a little bit because in the end, you have to get done in finals. And at that time, besides the 2004 grand final, Port had 3 great opportunities to do it and great opportunities to have a Brisbane Port Adelaide grand final, and they fell, unfortunately.
Yeah, and if you look back at across the 2 teams for the 2004 grand final, there's so many senior coaches that came out of both of those teams. There was a lot of talent, obviously on field, but so much talent off field in the coming couple of decades. I can think of half a dozen between the 2 teams off the top of my head that ended up becoming senior coaches. Not even counting the assistant coaches.
Yeah, that's right. And if people talk about, like Adam just said, how good our midfield was and how good our talent spread was, but you look at the Port team. I mean, they had one of my favourite all-time players from another club, Stewie Jew.
Oh yeah,
who I'm very happy to have at our club now.
In a very small role, but hopefully gets bigger.
Yeah, he had 2 Burgoynes, had Wanganeen, Pickett, and was the first of the Motlops there.
Corns boys.
Yeah, the Corns boys.
No, the Motlops came later.
Yeah, so you had Chad, who was an absolute gun. Like that peak period there of him as well. Him and Treadray, Chad could play centre half forward, centre half back. He could play anywhere. He had one of the best rigs I've ever seen as well. And Kane was a pretty good stopper. And he from memory, I reckon he got in the Norm Smith votes in '04 as well. Not one Brisbane player got in there. I know that. But yeah, and you had one of the Wakelands, and Brendan Lade was still there, I think, and Primus. And, like the talent spread there. I mean, Primus an old Fitzroy boy, of course, but that's where he learned how to play the game. Let's admit it. But
I was going to say, let's claim him.
But yeah, but not only just the coaching side of things, like the media side, like Treadray was pretty big in the media for a long time as well. I think Sean Burgoyne's in the media now. Both Burgoyne boys got sons coming through the system. And we all know what the Pickett family have done across their whole entire family as well.
Yeah.
And if you haven't picked up on it yet, I love watching Indigenous footballers.
Yeah.
Who doesn't? They're just they're amazing. And Port has a pretty rich history with Indigenous players. Mark Williams, especially during his time, brought a lot of Indigenous players to the club. And yeah, as you said, I think at the time, I don't know if it's still the record, but Port Adelaide had the most Indigenous players in their premiership team.
Wow.
I don't know if that's been surpassed recently, but at the time it was. And if you look at the day, Byron Pickett, Norm Smith medal, Gavin Wanganeen could have won the Norm Smith medal that day. Peter Burgoyne was doing what he does. So yeah, and you did mention Matthew Primus there as well. The sad thing about that, because he was probably our most inspirational captain in the AFL era, is he'd done his knee earlier that year, so he missed the grand final.
Right.
So did Josh Franco, who arguably at the time, those two were probably our they were definitely in our top five, but they probably were in our top three best players in at our club. So when we saw both of them go down with knees early in the season, it was looking pretty grim at that point, but they were able to find a few guys and a few role players, and Brogan came on. I think he didn't win an All-Australian that year, but in coming years would become an All-Australian ruckman. So yeah, if you think about that, like if you take Grundy and Heaney out of the Swans right now, would they win? Probably not. So I always thought it was a much more, with Port, they did have stars, but there was definitely a team element to it. It wasn't just about the stars. I look at the Crows, for example, during that period. They had a lot of guys who were 4-5-time All-Australians, but they never could beat Port Adelaide because Port were just so much better. And maybe they didn't have all the All-Australians that, say, other teams did, but as a team and a collective, they got the job done.
Yeah,
definitely.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The Crows definitely underachieved in that early 2000s, sort of early to mid 2000s era as well. Like they were regularly making finals. They used to have big battles against the Eagles a lot that I can recall. I think they swapped a few players back and forth between the two clubs. And you look at like the guys they had, McLeod, Tyson Edwards, Ken McGregor was pretty good.
Rashudo.
Yeah, Rashudo.
Man, that was such a good era for SA footy, hey, just across the two teams.
Ben
so
Hart,
much going on.
Ben Rutten, I think Rutten might have been a little bit later, but Ben Hart, like I used to love watching him play. Yeah, he wasn't a big boy, but he took on much bigger guys every week. But yeah, they definitely underachieved in that era. They probably should have won more, but luckily for us, myself and Al, it was our team that won those ones. So.
Yeah. Now, Adam, do you know if the club's doing much for the 20th anniversary for the 2004 grand final this year?
Yeah, well, this is the game. So they're going to run out in the same Guernsey that they wore in 2004, which it's an unpopular opinion, but I kind of wish they didn't change the Guernsey because I thought it was a bit unique.
Yeah.
While I think the one that we wear now, even though I love it because it's my club, it doesn't have the same personality, I suppose. So I'm going to get a bit of a thrill seeing the 2004 Guernsey run out onto Adelaide Oval. But yeah, that's what they've been pumping it up all week. A lot of retro stuff. They're bringing out a bit of a range, and they've got a few videos that have come out of like Port players watching the 2004 grand final together.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it's
always
been a
cool
bit
to
of a
see
build
that.
up. Yeah, and especially because, as you said, like a lot of these guys have gone off to other clubs. Like, Damien Hardwick played in that flag, and
Yep.
obviously he
That's
wasn't
right.
there. Sure, even just seeing like Sean Burgoyne sitting there and interacting and talking about that grand final, because obviously he had such a great career at Hawthorn.
Yeah.
And that's probably the one guy that, it helps a little bit that he got a flag at Port, but he's probably the one guy that I'm like, should never have left our club. I never wanted him to leave. It felt like, it was obviously a great situation for him, and it's great to see that he had all that success, but it burnt me a little bit as a Port supporter and it was a bit of an own goal by Port Adelaide because they didn't make him the captain when the playing group had voted for him. So, so to see those guys back and see that they still have a connection with the club is great.
It's unreal. He was an unreal talent, but it's also so crazy to think that he only really just stopped playing. Like it was not that long ago that he retired. So he's got such longevity as well. Because he hit the 400, didn't he?
He did.
But, yeah, incredible. Don't know how many players are going to get to that in the near future. Probably not too many.
Yeah, probably Pendlebury, or has he already gotten there? I don't even know
I
anymore.
don't think he's got there yet. I think he's close because I think they would have made a much bigger deal about it. But
Yeah.
I mean, you look with Dustin Martin, he's struggled to get to 300. So someone getting to 400 is just unreal. Like not many guys have done it, obviously. So yeah, no, big props to Sean Burgoyne. And obviously, we might touch on this later in the year with the draft situation, but you've got a couple of handy father sons coming through from the Burgoynes.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously got Jace at the moment, which is he's come on because he was always a guy that I looked at and he was skillful, but I wasn't sure about his body type. I wasn't sure if he was big enough. But for a guy his size, he's got courage, which is great. And then he doesn't. He seems to think very clearly on the field. He never seems rushed. He never seems like he's panicking, and he always makes good decisions. So probably this year is probably the first time I've actually gone, okay, he's definitely cemented his spot, and I could see him now playing for the next 5 or 6 years because I wasn't sure whether he was going to quite make it. Jackson Mead is in the team right now, and he's found himself a role, which has been great as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're getting a Nick Dacos type. It won't be right at the pointy end of the draft. It's all.
I got to stop you there, mate.
I'm on a. I was going to say Levi Ashcroft and Will Ashcroft, so I should have referenced them first.
Yeah, I got to pull you up. We're not allowed to say the D word on our podcast.
Yeah, we have a swear jar for
really?
mention of the D family. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it because of a little bit of the carry on, or is
a little bit
in the box and stuff like that?
Oh, look, it has nothing to do with them personally. It's the media talk around them and just the absolute god worshipping of that family, particularly youngest ND, as we call him.
And Daddy as well.
Oh yeah, he's gotten particularly bad since since the boys have come along. I felt like he was pretty quiet there for a few years.
We like the older brother much better than the younger one.
Yes, yeah, I actually don't mind him, JD.
Yeah. I mean, look, he's playing much better than that other JD over at West Coast, Jack Darling, who's about to get dropped, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that'll be interesting. Yeah, well, he'd be coming up to, how old's he now? He'd be mid-30s?
Nah, about 30.
Oh, okay, well, they just age faster over there with all that extra flying, I hear.
Yeah,
Wasn't there a big talk about that recently?
Yeah, they only get 8 business class seats though at Virgin, so
unheard of.
Yeah.
12 business class seats, I think.
Well, I know the Victorian media said 12, but the Freo or whoever came out and said, no, there's actually only 8. So I'm not too sure, but I reckon Nick Natanui would have needed his own plane when he flew over. He's a very, very big man.
Yep. Yeah, he's huge.
He is enormous. And
Another guy that I wish played on for a lot longer as well.
yeah,
He didn't have a huge amount of games under his belt by the end, did he?
no, he just had a lot of knee problems and other things as
Yeah.
well. But does a lot of charity work now, like a real lot of stuff with kids with cancer and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he's a good bloke.
Yeah.
I found him because we do some redrafts and we did his draft, and he was one of the hardest to rank because his absolute best is as good as any ruckman. But his peak was such a short period of time because of so many knee injuries and stuff. So I mean, we really haven't seen a ruckman with that kind of athleticism since he left. Like we've had athletic ruckman, but he was a different level.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the biggest examples of a what if in the AFL. Hey, like, what if his body stayed, solid the whole way through? Like his roof was so massive, like you mentioned. Like he's just a big what if, isn't he?
Yeah, and like that first knee injury came along right when he was at his peak as well, and obviously he missed out on winning a premiership.
Yeah,
And,
that was hard to. Yeah,
that went to someone who ended up at Port Adelaide not long after that. Scott Lysett ended up being a premiership ruckman.
Yeah, Scott Lysett is an interesting player. I've got to admit, he was solid, but I think by the time like the end of last year and stuff, it wasn't quite there anymore. And yeah, I think for Port Adelaide supporters, he was an interesting figure, shall we say?
I thought when you got him, he was a massive coup. Like that was, a big, massive pickup for you guys. But yeah, something's happened in the last couple of years.
He's a very different sort of cat. I've heard him get interviewed a few times, and he's definitely out there, which I like because I don't mind guys who go off the reservation a little bit. And apparently, whether it was after the 18 premiership or another game, it might have been another game. Apparently, he stood on the top of a mountain and yelled out across the valley, "Up the bloody coasters!" and all this merchandise got made with that on the front of it, a big picture of him. So yeah, he's a little bit different, but I don't mind that.
Yeah, I like that actually. I like guys when they go a little bit off script in the interviews and things like that. Nothing more boring than a guy who just goes, wheels out all the cliches, or all the cliches that we always rip on our podcast, and I know a few other podcasts always do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that when guys are a bit different and they speak their mind truly.
Yeah, and Adam, one of your former coaches, Choco Williams, was good for that too back in his day. I used to, being a Norwood supporter for the period I lived in Adelaide. Obviously, Port Magpies were the enemy, the hated enemy. But yeah, I appreciated Choco in the way, like, that grand final speech in 04, that was unreal.
He's an interesting figure, Mark Williams, and I think his eccentricness at times actually has worked against him since he left Port Adelaide, because you got to think about it. He's a premiership coach who, for a 3 to 4 year period, his team was one of the best teams in the competition. And then his time ends at Port Adelaide, and that was it. He was the head assistant at GWS, but then when Kevin Sheedy moved on, they decided to go in a different direction. And then, I mean, now he's obviously doing some really good work at Melbourne, developing their young players. But it's one of the most baffling things that he never got another go at it as a premiership coach who was a bit of an innovator of his time. And yet I think some of those eccentric natures and some of the things he did, I think ended up working against him. No one gave him that shot.
Yeah, he was always one of those guys, whenever they're talking about, the media was always talking about stacking coaches through the 2010s. He was always one of the names that was mentioned as a potential option, along with like Paul Roos and, a few other guys that would always get mentioned. So I was surprised that he, like you said, never actually got another senior gig.
And he did do some really good things at Werribee in the VFL for a few years as well, before finding his way back into the AFL system in Melbourne. But he was also the very first captain of the Brisbane Bears as well. I don't know if a lot of people remember that.
Yeah, coming over from Collingwood.
Yeah. where he was also captain.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got a
Yes.
very interesting history.
And then I think he might have come back for a year at Port Adelaide after that, because obviously the Williams family is synonymous with Port Adelaide. His father grew the kind of ethos around the club, and was a very big figure in South Australian football. And then obviously he had two brothers. He had a twin brother named Anthony, who unfortunately passed away.
Oh.
But his other brother, Stephen, who I think might have played for the Bears, or was at least on their list for a couple of years. And he played and then coached Port Adelaide. So yeah, the Williams family is just entrenched, or they are Port Adelaide in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I guess the Williams and the Phillips are probably the two biggest families in Port Magpies history. Anyway, definitely.
Yeah, I know what he's working.
Their family was. No, I was going to say family-wise, yes. And unfortunately, Jeff Motley was another big figure, and his son, Peter Motley, was a champion player until he had a car accident while he was playing for Carlton.
That's right.
And but he was the one who got away because he was one son that Port didn't want, and he ended up at Sturt, so who was a Port Adelaide rival. So we should be talking about the Motleys in the same way, but not quite.
Yeah, I'm vaguely old enough to remember Peter Motley and the accident, and like he was spoken about, just sort of vaguely remembering in the same sort of breath as Kernahan and Bradley and Platten, those sort of guys that came across to the VFL around about the same time.
My dad tells a story about Peter Motley when he lined up on Gary Ablett during a state game, and apparently just tore him apart. Like, Dad still talks about it to this day. This would have been, I don't know if it was 84, but it was obviously in the 80s. I think it was before he came over to Victoria. But yeah, those guys that you talk about ended up being champions, but Peter Motley might have been the best one.
Yeah, that's there's always stories like that too. Even at our club, we had a lot of guys. I mean, I remember we had a guy called Damien Cupido came to the club, and he just looked like he was going to be something really, really special. And he ended up kicking the dew in the reserves at Essendon a couple of years later. He never came on. He had all the talent and the big reputation and whatever else. And sometimes it's just luck plays a part in a lot of those things as well.
Yeah.
Which in the Peter Motley case was a lot of bad luck, and that's really unfortunate what happened to him. Yeah, well, I guess we probably should get into the weekend's game.
Yes.
And the selections. And with Adam being our guest and being the supporter of the home team, would you like to, if you've got it in front of you, that is, run us through the ins and outs of the power?
Yes, well, I'm going to get it quickly in front of me, but I did have a quick look before the podcast of what we've done, and swung the axe is probably the way that you would describe it. So we obviously, there was a couple of surprises, and then a couple of good ins. So our ins are Logan Evans, who is going to debut, and I had to actually look up to see exactly what type of player he is, because he's our mid-season draft pick. He's 189 centimeter. Yeah, 189 centimeter defender. So I'm guessing that they're bringing him in to, because that's kind of been an issue for Port Adelaide, a bit underrated, is that small to mid-sized defender. We've been carved up by some teams that have had really good small forwards, and obviously you've got Charlie Cameron. I hope he doesn't go to Charlie Cameron in his first game. He's a young 18-year-old. So, but I expect that he'll probably start. Then Jordan Sweet, obviously a ruckman. Finlayson, which I think is a good move. Our forward line didn't look right last week. I think when you don't have a star player, you need committee of guys who can kick goals, and missing Finlayson was important to was felt, as well as Willie Rioli, who's actually been in some really good form this year,
He has.
playing for Port Adelaide. Probably, before the injury, I was thinking this was going to be his best season at AFL level. So I think Finlayson and Rioli coming back in does make that forward line a bit more potent. But the outs, the surprising out is Soldo. Now, Soldo
Yes.
had a knee and was out for 5 or 6 weeks. And I went last week while I was in Sydney, I went to the captain's run and he was kind of away from the group. He wasn't joining in the main group. And there was another guy called Vicentini, who's a backup ruckman, who I thought might come in because he still looked a little bit proppy, but they've omitted him. So maybe you just need a little bit more time and in the SANFL, get a bit more form up before we bring him back in. Quinton Narkle's been omitted, which I'm kind of sad about. I wanted him to get a bit more of a run. I think he'd be a perfect sub. Dylan Williams, who's our, basically a back pocket, and I thought he was all right last week, and he's plays on a man really well, so I was a bit surprised by that. And then Fraser Evans, he's just one of those guys that's always in and out. He's had a few good games. He kicked 4 goals in a showdown that we lost, but he hasn't been able to get a sustained run of it. He'll have, I think he only had 4 touches last week and got subbed out. So, that a few surprises there, but overall, I think it is a better looking team than last week.
Yeah, I'm pretty worried from our point of view with Rioli being back in.
He always does well against us.
Yeah, he's such a dangerous player. I mean, just having the surname Rioli makes him a great footballer already. But like I've loved Willie. I actually was lucky enough to see his dad play back in the day, Willie Senior, and loved watching him as well. But Finlayson, that's obviously a pretty good move from Port's point of view because you're bringing another big guy back in, knowing full well that we've got a couple of big twin towers down back as well. But I was very surprised with Soldo. I didn't know about the knee soreness, but like at the start of the season, he was on fire. He was kicking goals. He was, I think he beat Max Gawn in a game, if I recall, and he was going crazy.
Yeah, and especially last week, we didn't and this is why not picking Finlayson last week was it didn't really make a lot of sense because then your backup ruck is Ollie Lord, who, he's only a young kid going in against Briggs, who's a big guy. And so Soldo is going to have to ruck more than what you'd kind of expect. And so I was just a little bit surprised by that. And I think that probably does him a disservice. He didn't have a great game, but and one thing I should mention though is with Finlayson coming back in, Port have gone real tall in their forward line. They've got Lord, Marshall, Georgiadis, and Finlayson. Now Finlayson I like because he's not just a mark kick at goal. He can do a lot at ground level. So he has started as a sub before, so they might do that. I wouldn't do that. I think that would be fraught with danger. So, but it's interesting. I think Port have just gone, we just got to get as many goals into this team as possible. So if you're going to play 4 tools, it's going to have to be 4 tools.
Yeah, we've been down that road having a tool as a sub with Darcy Ford a few times. And Al and I are not fans of that move.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Jeremy Finlayson, has he been out injured or has he been down on form this year? Or what's the story been with him so far this season?
Well, it was obviously the suspension for that homophobic slur. I think he got 3 weeks for that. And in that game where Port Adelaide did a number on Essendon, I think he kicked about 4 goals, and it was kind of the best I'd seen Finlayson for a while.
Yeah.
He's obviously got a lot of stuff going on in his personal life as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's having a bit of effect, but last year, probably for 3/4 of the season, he was really good. Okay. And like his best is really good. But then, and in that streak, he was actually our leading goal kicker in that 13-game winning streak that Port had. A lot of people forget that Dixon didn't play a lot of those games, and it was really relying on Finlayson, Marshall, and Lord, because Georgiades had a knee as well.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
then he kind of went off towards the end of the year. I think his last game, well, he was sub in the GWS final, but he played against Brisbane, didn't have a great game.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't going to be picked for the first round, but Ollie Lord got dropped. Oh, he got injured, had a knee injury, so he got a reprieve there. And then he felt like he was coming into some really good form, getting back to his best. And then obviously, and rightfully so, he got suspended for what he said.
Yep.
And he came back through the SAFL, played really well, came into the AFL, didn't play well, went back down to the SAFL, played really well, and now he's back up again.
Okay. Yeah. So he's a bit all over the place, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he goes.
Hopefully not too well this week.
No.
Afterwards,
Well enough to get another game.
Yeah, and then after that he can go for it, go for his life. All right. Well, Al, do you want to run through our changes?
Yeah, sure. So last week, or even earlier in the week, I was thinking we probably wouldn't have any changes. Team played pretty well. We both discussed potential, Connor McKenna, he's a bit out of form. Would we bring Noah into the team? Would we make McKenna the sub? Well, that kind of got answered for us when it was revealed that Noah Answorth got injured because he played the VFL game after being the sub on the Friday night, and he got injured. So he's out of the team, and Shadow Brain is back into the team.
Yeah, I like that. I'm not against it at all, but it's unfortunate for Noz. He was having a career best season. I think I've said that so many times that if anybody gets $1 for the amount of times I've said that this year, they're probably going to be able to sponsor us instead of us taking on a betting company.
Yeah.
Which we won't be doing. But really unlucky for Noz because he sort of just got his footy right and had some continuity in the senior team. And yeah, unfortunately that happened in the VFL. And there's a little bit of chatter in one of our Facebook groups, one of the Lions Facebook groups, that there may or may not have been a few Sandringham players jumping on him when he was down on the ground away from camera in that VFL game, and that's what caused the injury. Of course, the streaming of the VFL game was pretty much unwatchable. So,
as usual.
Yeah, well, it was worse than usual. So I have to take their word for it. But Shadow Brain Ian is another good one. Made his debut down at Adelaide Oval in the drawn match.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So and he played pretty well last week in the VFL as well.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, is he brought in as the sub or, whatever their plan is there. I hope that they don't make him the sub and then just give him, 10 minutes at the end of the game and then go, well, he didn't do much. And it's like, well, you only gave him 10 minutes, which is what they've been doing for a lot of the times that he's come in.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not the case.
They've done it we are the worst team for using the sub in the whole comp.
Oh, yeah.
In the history of having a sub in the game, we never get it right. I mean, look, we had Jared Lyons a fair bit last year, and he was only coming on for 5 minutes here and there, and it was just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, and infamously earlier in the season, we had Jimmy Tunstall as a sub and just forgot to use him for the whole game, so we just didn't bring him on at all. Yeah, just frustrating things like that. But one exciting thing about something that's happening this week, I mean, we talked about the anniversary of the 2004 grand final and all that sort of stuff, but talking about personal milestones, one of our captains is having his 200th game.
Yes, the big chief.
Yes.
Yeah.
First academy kid to reach that milestone.
I did see that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all of a sudden he's playing his 200th game, and I noticed there's been a lot in the media from the usual sources questioning, oh, do we underrate Harris Andrews? Is he better?
Yes.
Is he better than what we've been saying he is? Well, yeah, just quietly.
He's been playing as the main man down back since he was 20.
Yeah.
Like, he's incredibly underrated.
Yeah, he's criminally underrated, and probably should have had another 2 more All-Australian jackets as well than what he's gotten. But
oh yeah, well, you know how I feel about AA selection and them cramming all of their midfielders into the forward line and not picking true wingers and how they pick their captains and all that sort of stuff.
there's actually a video getting around on YouTube. It came from the Channel 9 footy show on Sunday where they showed about, I think, about 2 or 3 minutes of some of the Australian selectors having a chat on who should be in the team and so forth. And yeah, Eddie Betts was not too happy with Kane Cornes and some of his suggestions. And then Kane Cornes had a bit of a go at Abby Holmes about it. But yeah, I think they put out an 80-man squad or something a week or so ago, I think I heard.
80-man?
Like an initial squad before they bring out the 40-man squad. And in the top 80 players, they didn't have Adam Treloar in there at all.
Yeah, that's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, and I did listen to the Ads and Dunks podcast today at work. It's hard listening sometimes, but they did talk about that, and Treloar was very humble about it. And he was like, "Oh, there's better players than me and whatever." But that guy's been on fire this year. I mean,
yeah.
He kicked a goal against us and didn't do a great deal else. But every other game he's played, he's been on fire. So I'm not looking forward to seeing what the All-Australian team looks like at the end of this year. I think the cupboard might be a bit bare for us and probably for Port as well. Adam, what do you think?
Well, I mean, firstly, the Adam Treloar thing, Joe was the one who actually, put a spotlight on him, and I probably missed it a little bit as well. And watching Treloar over the last few weeks, he's been incredible. And yeah, if you've got an 80-man list, or if you've only got a few Western Bulldogs players, he's got to be one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But Port might be the first team to make the 8 and have no All-Australians. I'm starting to feel that might be the case this year, because if you look at even our good players, they've all missed time, and then they've all had kind of in different form as well. So like, you'd think if you're going, okay, who's going to make an All-Australian from a Port Adelaide point of view? You're probably going Butters, Rosie, Horne-Francis, and Houston. I think Houston's probably the only one that you could probably say is in that mix. I think Butters has kind of been up and down. Rosie's been injured and then been indifferent when he's come back. And Horne-Francis, love to see him in the squad, but he's not playing at a level yet to actually get in the team, although he has been phenomenal over this last period. I think probably for the last 4 to 6 weeks, he might have been Port's best player.
People forget sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
Yeah, people forget with him too that it's only his 3rd season in the league, and the expectations are so high. And we said the same thing about Darcy Wilmot.
Yeah, that's right.
A week ago, like people just get a bit complacent about these young guys because they do perform at that high standard so often when they're so young now. They come into the system, they're already professional and whatnot, because the Colt systems now are so much better than what they were back in the days, even 10 years ago. And I think people get a bit hard on some of these young guys. Horne-Francis as well. So I was a bit of a critic of him last year, I will admit. And I think I got caught up in that. I got caught up in that wave of him being the nickelback of the AFL.
Well, let me put it this way. I think a lot of this comes down to the ND factor, like just how good he has been straight off the bat. Suddenly, Jason Horne-Francis, who's the number 1 pick, who wouldn't have been the number 1 pick if ND had been able to, be selected by anyone.
That's true.
But it was pretty close. Jason Horne-Francis has been I had a lot of mail about him even before his draft. Like my brother-in-law said he was so excited about how good this was, and he was hoping that the Crows would lose enough games to get him. And obviously they didn't. And to put in perspective, when Port Adelaide came into the AFL, I was 10 years old and I saw their first ever game. I was a Port Magpies supporter. Jason Horne-Francis is easily the most talented kid I've ever seen come through Port Adelaide. And you watch him now, it's the brute strength, it's the goal kicking. He has really good forward craft, and we ask a lot of him. He hasn't been able to just play high half forward or come off the back of the square. He's been in the guts, or I should say down the guts, in the guts since the moment he came to Port Adelaide. And I think what people are going to find, because you got, even the North Melbourne thing and whatnot, like, you don't like, I wouldn't want that to happen to my club, but
No.
once that eventually subsides, and maybe if another player does it, there are rumours that one player might look to do it this year. I think people will see what this guy is capable of, and apparently he is just. We were talking to someone today. He's just so competitive, and he's just and Travis Boak being his like mentor at the club and stuff. Yeah, the sky's the limit for him. But yeah, Buzz, Rosie, any Port youngster, Horn France is easily the most talented and doing the most at such a young age.
I love Boki. He's from down my way, down on the surf coast. He's a Torquay boy. I'm from a little bit further up from there, but not too far away. And actually, I saw him play cricket as a junior before. He probably wasn't a junior actually, but he had already been drafted, so he probably wouldn't have been a junior. And of all the footballers in the AFL who've played cricket, he's probably the best I've ever seen at cricket, which pleases me no end. Yeah, and so in Geelong where I live, we get a lot of AFL players and ex-AFL players and guys who end up going into the AFL coming through our local cricket leagues, and I've seen them all. So many guys, and I've played against a few of them, but Boki he was just unbelievable. He's just that guy that could be good at everything he does.
Well, he's my favourite Port player, and it goes. I did a bit of tribute to him when he got his 350th, because it goes beyond the footy field for me with Travis Boak. You talk about Nick Nat Nui, but he does. Travis Boak's done so much for charity and for kids' cancer, and as a guy who has kids myself, it's not even worth thinking about. And the fact that he had his own personal tragedy with obviously losing his father to cancer, and then to use it as a way to help others. He's been such a great ambassador for the club and footballers in general.
Yeah, and the Boak family down in Torquay have been really big on female sports as well. And Sarah Boak was one of the coaches of one of their girls' cricket teams that my daughter played against, and my daughter was having a bit of trouble with her bowling that day. And Sarah, opposition coach, walked up, gave her a few tips, helped her with her run up, and she ended up getting a hat trick not long after.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and and she still got clapped by all the Torquay players and whatever. And so, they are a good family, and they're very culturally good from everything I've seen as well. Would have loved to have had Travis at our club, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you had pick 4 in that draft, didn't you? If I remember right. You picked Leuenberger.
Yeah, Leuenberger. He had so much talent, that guy, but his body he couldn't get his body right.
Yeah, we've had a few of those around that time as well.
But Louis is actually coaching in the Quaffle now. He's coaching a team that Daniel Rich plays for now. And
it's Wilston Grange, or is it?
No.
Fitzroy?
No. We did talk about it the other week when Richie kicked about 7,000 goals in a game.
That's right.
And another one of our former players, Jono Freeman's playing there as well. And it's going to bug me. I'm not a Queenslander. I'm shocking. I'm actually going up to Brisbane in 2 weeks, and I'm looking at maps trying to find places to go for lunch before I go to the Gabba, and trying to find a gym to go to on the Monday morning. And I've got no idea where anything is in Brisbane other than the Gabba.
Yep.
The airport and Willowbank Raceway, which isn't even in Brisbane, but yeah, that's
pretty much all we got up here, to be honest.
Oh well, we've got Brighton Homes Arena now.
That's true. Michael Voss Oval
in your neck of the woods.
That's true, just down the road from me.
Yeah. So So yeah, Adam, this is the reason why we do things on Zoom, because Al's up in Queensland, and as you know, I'm in Victoria, and yeah, so that would have been interesting for yourself and Joe as well, doing your podcast, not being in the same room last week. I did listen to the whole thing the other day at work, and that's when I thought, well, yeah, you should be right coming on with us recording on Zoom. After
I always find it harder on Zoom because you just
Oh,
can't
yeah.
see the other person. Like,
yeah,
I do have a tendency to talk over people, so I apologize if that, that happens here as well. But yeah, no, Joe and I, we do our best work in person, but sometimes
Oh, yeah.
we can't get to the studio together.
yeah, well, your videos that you have up on Facebook, I've watched a few of them, and your hit counts are massive. Like, you're getting thousands of people watching it. It's really good, like, because you guys work really, really hard to promote your pod, and it's been a bit of an inspiration for myself. To don't just sit back and hope that people are going to find it. I mean, I see you guys in pretty much every footy group on the socials and promoting everything in your videos. As I say, get big hit counts. We don't fuss too much about the YouTube side of things for us. That's just an extra thing.
Mm.
But yeah, like we're starting to get pretty good numbers on Spotify and Apple. But yeah, I still recall we got excited when we got 14 listeners.
Yeah.
Well, 14. It was.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
It was like, oh, a 7-day period. We've had 14 listens. How good is this?
Yeah,
We were over the moon.
it's a lot more now. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
tens of thousands now, which is really good over a month. So that's good.
yeah, and
Because you guys pump out so much content though. Like I
Oh,
look at
yeah.
your feed, I can't keep up. Like I have to, listen to on the train on the way to work, listen to one, and then I'm like, oh, you've got another one up that I've missed. And so
yeah,
you
Yeah.
guys, we just do one weekly pod, but you guys do a few.
we
Well,
generally,
we do a wrap up, and then we do a preview in separate episodes, and then sometimes Ash will put out some extra content for his other podcast, which is more like the historical side of things as well.
yeah, just that one just focuses on
Yeah.
Fitzroy. But over the last couple of weeks, I've done a couple of little YouTube things where I've just tying up a few loose ends, a little bit of housekeeping, and I got in trouble last week for not, because I run a tipping comp and a fantasy league, and I got in trouble for not keeping people updated on how they're going. So I had to go and talk about that a bit this week. And yeah, but so Adam, I'm not sure if you're aware, but my 13-year-old daughter, who's about to turn 14, she keeps reminding me, she basically runs our TikTok. We're way too old to know what to do on TikTok, but
Definitely.
she helped us get that going, and she helps me with a lot of ideas, design ideas, and a little bit of editing and that sort of thing. And she's just about the brains behind how we go about promoting ourselves now as well.
She's our secret weapon.
Yeah,
Well, we're old hats as well, so like we're learning on the fly. We haven't quite made it to the TikTok uh, space yet, but it might have to happen after a while.
Oh, you guys would boom if you went to TikTok with some smaller clips from your show. You'd
yeah,
boom.
definitely. One of the funniest things with the TikTok sort of thing. So I put a video when Brandon Ryan played his first game for us against the Hawks a couple of weeks ago, and I put a video of him standing in the goal square doing nothing, and I think it's got well over 2,000 hits on it now. And yet there's a video of Eric Hipwood taking a screamer on the boundary line, and that's got only 200 hits. It's a weird place, TikTok.
Wow. Yeah, my wife's had a little bit to do with TikTok through her work, and yeah, it's there's no rhyme or reason a lot of the time why things boom or don't boom. It's just
Yeah.
kind of like luck of the draw. The simplest thing, like you said, could become the hit.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no, we'll definitely have to have a look at. Now, before, like, you just mentioned something though that I want to ask you a question about, because you talk about Fitzroy history.
Yep.
Can I ask you why? Because it's been bugging me a little bit, but obviously I'm not a supporter. When the clubs merged,
Mm.
why isn't the Fitzroy premierships counted as
Oh,
the Brisbane Lions premierships? Because I know there's an amateur club here in Victoria, the Fitzroy Lions, that claim those premierships. But I would have thought if the clubs truly merged, that all history comes together.
Yeah, that's been a very contentious issue, and the club recognises the Fitzroy history and the Fitzroy premierships. They do a hell of a lot better job of it now than what they did initially. So, really, so much work has gone into that. But the AFL and all the media outlets, I guess, don't, and it really irks me as a Fitzroy boy. But even just as a Brisbane Lions fan now, it's like, well, that's our history. And they tend to forget a lot of the Bears stuff. I mean, the Bears won a VFL reserve or AFL reserves premiership as well. But so the boys on the Raw Deal podcast, who are the original OG Brisbane Lions pod, formerly run by the club, and they're independent now. They've actually mounted a media campaign. Mike Whiting's one of their co-hosts who works for the AFL's website and the media department, and they're mounting a campaign to get the premierships combined, because that would give us 11.
yes.
And have us in the... Sorry.
I have no dog in the fight, but I'm with you. Like, I actually thought of that maybe this hasn't been spoken enough. I wasn't sure whether old Fitzroy supporters didn't want the premierships to be counted, like whether there was a bit of pushback from that. But I think, you got the you got the Murray Merit Medal, obviously.
Yep.
Kevin Murray being a Fitzroy legend, and so I think it should. So I reckon, yeah, I'm with you. I want to join the fight to get your lost flags counted.
Yeah, definitely. And
Appreciate the support.
yeah, and look, I guess it means a lot hearing it from a Port supporter, because a lot of Fitzroy people have a bee in their bonnet about Port Adelaide, because obviously Fitzroy was taken out of the situation to bring Port Adelaide in. But I moved on from that after a while. But yeah, it did hurt for a little while. And look, it still hurts that Fitzroy doesn't have the Fitzroy name in the AFL, because my family supported the club since pretty much the very beginnings, since one of my ancestors arrived in Australia the same year that Fitzroy started their football club, and he lived in Fitzroy. So it does. But the amateur club, we try and get to games, as often as possible. Haven't been to any this year. And we've been to, a few really good ones. And David Layton, the president, is a massive Brisbane Lions and Fitzroy fan. He is a tireless worker for that football club and for Fitzroy and for the Lions. He's probably one of the hardest working people in the football industry. And I believe he's also tried to mount a campaign to get the premierships combined as well. But one of the things too, Adam, you brought up that you were wondering if there was any pushback from Fitzroy people. So a lot of Fitzroy people didn't come across to the Brisbane side of things. They wanted to merge with North Melbourne, so a big portion went to North Melbourne regardless, because North did mount a campaign in the following year to say, come across to us, we'll give you this, 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 and this. None of which they actually gave them, but
They didn't give their own fans anything either.
Yeah, and I think the 500 or so Fitzroy fans that went across tripled their membership as it was. But yeah, there was a lot who just walked away from football as well. So and then again, there was also a lot of people who took up until the premierships, I guess, to get on board. And look, that's okay. That's fine. I've no issue with anybody's decisions, because you have to make the decision that's right for you. I was on board pretty much straight away. The majority of my family didn't come on board. My dad did, and obviously 2 of my 3 kids did as well. But yeah, it's one of those things. But look, I think the AFL, the media, they've got to do a better job of recognising Fitzroy and constantly referring to, North Melbourne are worse than Fitzroy. A lot of them forget that in 1993, Fitzroy almost made the finals. They were only 2 wins off second place in one of the closest seasons ever. But throughout the 80s, they made the finals quite a lot. They had a Brownlow medalist in Bernie Quinlan, who also won 2 Colemans. They won the reserves premiership in 1989. Fitzroy had a lot of success towards the end. It's just that people just tend to remember those last 2 seasons where there was only, a small handful of wins.
And as the resident Bears fan as well, there's this narrative that the Bears were struggling around the time of the merger as well, but that wasn't the case because the Bears were playing finals right up around the merger, and they reckoned that we were struggling for talent, and there was a lot of people that said, oh well, the Lions only won their 2001, 2, and 3 flags because of the merger, and it's like, well, actually most of the stars from there were Bears players. We had a couple of Chris Johnson, obviously Fitzroy legend, now merged club legend, but a lot of the guys like Leppich, Voss, Ackermanis, they were all Bears players. Darryl White and stuff like that. But I remember when we got our wooden spoon in 2017, the media didn't really have any problem lumping all of Fitzroy's wooden spoons to our tally. So it's interesting how they don't give us the flags, but they'll more than happily give us all of Fitzroy's spoons and all of the bad stats and lump them together. It's interesting how that works.
We have a very shared history in a lot of ways. Like obviously Port Adelaide isn't a merged club, but we had for a long time the disassociation between Port Adelaide Magpies and Port Adelaide Power. Yes. So basically, the AFL came to South Australia and was like, we want another team in South Australia, and the Port Adelaide Magpies were the only solo team that put a bid in by themselves. And the thought was it was always going to be just Port Adelaide going into the AFL. They wanted to do this for a long time. They felt like they'd outgrown the SANFL. And then they were given the license, but the SANFL owned the license. And the SANFL were the ones who split the teams and was like, they've got to be 2 separate entities. And, there's a long history of the SANFL, doing things to try and curtail Port Adelaide. Maybe that's the bias in me, but there are a lot of examples of that.
That's
and
true.
It took us a long time to get those clubs basically where it should have been, because people like me, I'm an old Port Adelaide Magpies supporter. It wasn't even a question. When Port Adelaide came into the AFL, I dropped my Crows, supporting straight away. My whole family did. We all went to Port Adelaide. And most of us did. There are some Port Adelaide Magpie supporters who stayed with the Crows, but most people transitioned over and went there. And then for a long time, we're being denied the fact that they were the same club. And so once it actually brought it back and we were able to, be together like we should have always been, it just changed the club. And so I understand that there's, sometimes with these things, there's a bit of an identity crisis, or where should it sit? And as you said, like I know famously, Murphy from Carlton, his dad obviously was a Fitzroy legend himself, but never really embraced the Brisbane Lions to the point where obviously Mark ended up at Carlton. And so, it is a bit like that. It is the ex-players embracing it that kind of brings everyone else along. And that's what we've seen with the Port Adelaide Magpies, is all those old guys who played for the Port Magpies are, big Port Adelaide supporters in the AFL. The most famous one, although you guys probably don't know who he is Tim Genever. He was our captain at the time of Port Adelaide coming in the AFL, and he's in the media just spruiking everything Port Adelaide. And it just really helps that, identity part of it and people moving on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think obviously, the 2 clubs are very similar when it comes to that. And you could also loop the Sydney Swans being, a relocation of South Melbourne as well. I always find that the 3 of those clubs together, we have a lot in common when it comes to, their identity changing over time and, merging between competitions like, the SANFL and the AFL and stuff. So I have a soft spot for those 2 clubs for those reasons.
One of the things with the Swans, it's funny, with their rivalry with the Giants that apparently is very heated. The Giants fans, all 5 of them, like to refer to Sydney as South Melbourne and use it as an insult. And the Swans fans are like, well, that's our heritage. We love it.
Yeah.
It's not really that insulting. It's weird. I don't think
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like I think the relocation and the embracing the old identity, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great.
yeah. And like, well, I guess, we relate a lot to the Swans as well. I mean, for me
Yes.
growing up, and probably maybe for you, Adam, as well, you're a little bit younger than me, but probably not too much. As kids growing up in the 90s, Saturday night or Sunday afternoon, there was always a Swans or a Bears game on. And you didn't get every game on TV, but you always, well, maybe, I don't know what it was like in Adelaide, actually. But in WA and I was in Darwin and Tassie briefly as well. And you always got to see the Swans or the Bears play, mainly on a Sunday afternoon, but sometimes on a Saturday night as well.
It was always Port Crows first. That was always like you got those games, and then you got like a sprinkling of other games throughout the weekend. And actually, now that you mention it, yeah, there probably was a lot of Bears games, that we got seen because it's just a really nice time slot for the South Australian, where we sit in the country, I suppose. But also, you mentioned about the North Melbourne thing, and I know that you do a history pod. I don't want to make this about history,
That's all
but
right.
the only thing that stopped that merger, it sounds like, was North Melbourne basically wanted all the Fitzroy players to come over and have like an extended squad, but it happened to coincide with North Melbourne being a really good team. And
Yeah.
so they were really concerned that they were going to somehow make a super team.
Yes.
Obviously, they won the 96 premiership. They lose in 98, but win 99. But in essence, like I know that you said, obviously, a lot of people say about all the Fitzroy players coming over to the Brisbane Lions, and it made that super team. But no matter which way they sliced it, whoever Fitzroy went to, they were going to be a successful team, whether it was the Brisbane or North Melbourne, and kind of what they were fearing still happened. It not the sole reason why it happened, but it still happened. It just happened in a different spot.
Yeah, and I reckon all of the married Fitzroy players are probably glad they didn't merge with North Melbourne. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, another reason is the reason that you just mentioned, but I also heard that the Bears were much more willing to let the Brisbane team have much more of the Fitzroy identity, keep the Lion, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas the North Melbourne side of it, they basically wanted to absorb Fitzroy and keep it mostly the same as it was in terms of like the jumper and the logo and the colors and everything. They basically wanted to completely absorb them instead of it being a 50-50 merger. I
Yeah,
think that was what kind of got it over the line in the end.
there was going to be a logo on the shorts, and allegedly they were going to be called the North Fitzroy Kangaroos. But people forget as well, Fitzroy nearly moved to Brisbane in the mid '80s. They also nearly moved to Sydney in the early '80s before South Melbourne did. They also had the failed merger with Footscray in 1989, but also they had potential mergers with Collingwood and Melbourne in the early '90s as well.
Yeah.
And you had the Melbourne and Hawthorn failed merger in 96 as well, which nearly went ahead. The members of Melbourne voted yes, and the Hawks members ended up voting no. But the AFL landscape could have looked a lot different.
Oh yeah. And imagine all the stuff we don't even know about as well.
Yeah,
It's fascinating to think about.
it is. Yeah.
What about if Port came in 1990? That nearly happened. I shouldn't say it too loudly. As I said, I live with a Crows supporter, so they get a little bit uppity about that, even though Port, like, nearly getting to the AFL is the reason why the Crows exist. So,
Yeah.
but that's a big South Australian story that probably we don't have time for today.
Yeah, and a good mate of Al's and mine from years gone by, Dave Barracliff, is a South Australian diehard Brisbane Lions and diehard Fitzroy and Norwood Football Club supporter. He's told me a few stories over the years about how Norwood almost tried to get into the AFL as well, or in the VFL actually, during the mid to late 80s.
It won't happen, but I would love to see Nord in the AFL. Like I think when they look back on that period where there was talk about a second team and whatnot, they're
Mm.
really going to look it back and think it's a missed opportunity because Port were the most successful SANFL team and was the number one team, number one supporter, and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah.
But Nord weren't far behind. They are traditional rivals, just like Carlton Richmond or
Mm.
like Carlton Collingwood. That was the rivalry in South Australian football. One team has now assured that they're going to live on forever in the
Hmm.
AFL with and playing at the top level. That's Port Adelaide. And Nord, unfortunately, it sounds like it's not going to be a reserve competition yet. It sounds like the logistics are too hard at the moment, but
Yeah.
eventually there will be an AFL reserves competition and Norwood will be pushed even further down. And I think that's a shame because they are just such a great football club in their own right. Even as a person who barracks against them, I lived in that area or around Norwood as well in South Australia. So yeah, I was sad to see that they probably won't ever get their chance. But yeah, they when it started building about them potentially wanting to get into the AFL and get that 20th license, I was all supporting it.
Yeah, no, it'd
Yeah,
be interesting because, there's eventually going to have to be a 20th team with, Tasmania being the 19th team. So there's only really a couple of places that they could pull the 20th team from. And I think SA and WA
mm,
are probably the obvious
yeah,
options.
yeah. The logistics of
The only
Darwin.
thing is,
Okay,
I
keep
I was
going.
going to say the only thing is in South Australia is that um, it would cannibalize the Crows.
Mm,
That's why
Yeah,
it wouldn't happen because no Port supporters are going to change and go for Norwood.
no,
So it would cannibalize the Crows. The location of where it is and the surrounding suburbs, it would be perfect.
mm,
They've got the history, so that's something that teams are going to have to manufacture. Whoever that 20th team is, they're going to have to build it. I like existing clubs. Obviously being a supporter of one
yep,
coming in because you've got that history already there, but the Crows would be the biggest pushback for that, and Crow supporters don't want it, while Port supporters would be happy for it because they're the ones that would lose their supporters. And actually, you'd probably find that you know it's Crows are the number one team in town, but Port aren't as far behind as what they used to be.
yep.
If
yeah,
Nord came in, Port would be the biggest team again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And history shows that the AFL would much rather create a team from scratch than, promote a team from, the Sandful or the Waffle or anything like that. Because what's the only team that they've really done that with since, the creation of the VFL, essentially?
mm,
Everyone else has been a brand new team created. The Bears, the Eagles, even Adelaide Crows,
yeah.
Fremantle.
Even the Dockers, I know they claim to have that history of the East and South Fremantle, but they're not associated with those two clubs at
Not
all.
truly, no.
Yeah, and but yeah, I was about to say just before the logistics of having a team in Darwin. As much as I would love to see it, because I would love to see 18 Riolis running around on the field every week.
Yeah,
It's not. There's no. It's just
yeah,
not viable.
it can't happen.
I think another West Australian team, honestly, like South Australia, the population is probably about the same as Western Australia, but Western Australia is has a bigger growth corridor in the northern suburbs of Perth for a start, but financially as well, like there's a hell of a lot more money. There's 50,000 Eagles fans every second week who can't get a seat at a game.
Yep.
Um, like they've got over 100,000 members and 60,000 seats in their stadium, and I think personally a third West Australian team. And wouldn't it be funny? And I've got a couple of Freo supporter friends that are probably going to hate me for saying this, but wouldn't it be funny if a third West Australian team came in and won a flag before the Dockers?
Jeez, that would be brutal.
You said that I had no part in that. I just want to back away slowly from that comment.
Well,
But they don't want it. Like the waffle set because the waffle is different over there than it is in South Australia. So in South
yeah,
Australia, Crows and Port Adelaide own their licenses, but in West Australia, the Waffle owns them.
Yeah.
And they recently said they don't want a third team because they're worried about the fact that they want two strong Western Australian teams. They don't want to kind of cannibalize themselves. So I'm a little bit different. I think that the 20th team, so the AFL didn't seek to bring in a 19th team. It was really the groundswell of support and the push from Tasmania to make a 19th team.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm not 100% convinced the AFL is going to rush for a 20th team because in essence, they're still trying to set up and then they're pouring lots of money into GWS. They're pouring lots of money into the Gold Coast. They're going to have to do the same for Tasmania, although Tasmania are probably starting from a higher base. There are a lot of some of the left affluent Victorian teams as well. They're pouring money into those. I think North Melbourne, as much as I want to see them do well, there would be a little bit of concern there from the AFL. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they just hold off. I reckon it's going to have to take a real massive push from somewhere, whether it be, like you said, logistically it can't be Darwin, but whether it be a northern team or whether it be a Norwood who comes out and goes, well, here's the business. Because the one thing that Norwood does have for them is iconic South Australian companies are already linked to them. So getting sponsors and stuff like that, and financially, I think isn't the big concern with them. And they've already got this like a little stadium, but they'd probably play out of Adelaide Oval. It's more where does their supporters come from? That's the big question, because we've now had generations of Crow supporters. My wife's family, Norwood supporters, but have had now, 30 years plus with the Crows. So they're not going to switch over. So that's the only question with that one. I think it's going to have to be a push from a group.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. The only thing that I think would make them probably want to speed up getting a 20th team into the competition is the fact that once Tasmania is up and running, we're going to have a bye every single weekend.
Yeah.
Because of the number of teams. It's going to be like
Don't we have that
20...
now?
Yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah, it feels that way.
There's 9 buys that we've had so far.
Yeah, well,
they love a buy in the AFL.
We've already had 2 this year, so
I think that's the only thing that would make them kind of speed up that bridging that gap between the 19th and 20th team. I mean, they did it with GWS and Gold Coast. They only had 1 season between them. They really rushed to get like 2 in at the same time. So. Look, I don't know. That's not necessarily an obvious answer. I mean, like Ash said, your heart says Darwin, but your brain says probably WA. But then, like you said, there's good and bad reasons for all of the options, and I can't see them leaving it at 19 forever. So it'd be really interesting to see what they finally settle on down the line.
Yeah, from the TV rights point of view as well. Sorry.
What's interesting? Oh, sorry.
No, you're right. You go ahead.
I thought you finished.
Ah.
No, I was just saying that, have you noticed with the AFLW, they've gone to weeks, not rounds?
Yes, I have.
So is that a way to get away from the bye? Is that you play, it's not about playing weekly, it's kind of playing, like just playing the amount of games?
So
maybe that's a way to that.
What they've done with the AFLW is they've been sneaky. They've said, all right, we'll give you more games. Which is what you want, but we're not going to give you more time. So we're going to squeeze extra games in midweek and so forth, which doesn't really work for a semi-professional league because obviously they're not full-time footballers. I think the AFL has set themselves up to fail a little bit there, but hopefully that's not true. But because you've got teams traveling to Western Australia midweek, but still playing on the 2 bookended weekends as well without a bye around it. So I don't know how that's going to work, but look, I hope they don't. I mean, we recall in 2020 when they did a lot of that with the men's comp, condensed a lot of the games into midweeks, and there was 4-day turnarounds and that sort of thing. Yeah. I hope they don't do that. I'd rather they just play Thursday to Sunday every week. It's going to be interesting because with the TV rights, obviously, there's an extra team, but there's not going to be an extra game every week.
No.
So that'll be the interesting factor. I mean, it's not for a couple more years anyway before anyone has to worry about that.
Yeah, it'll come off quick though, mate. It's gonna get here really quickly because I think they're looking at having a VFL team by 26 or
Yeah, I
something like
think
that.
so. Yeah.
And like so, well, actually, I think it was 27. They'll have a VFL team, and then they'll be in the AFL by 28. So that means that they're going to be in the 26 draft,
Yeah.
which is
And that
crazy to think.
that's the thing now too, why a lot of, and this is what the media don't tell us when they win, people like Kane Corns or whoever it is, that David King and so forth, when they whinge about the long-term contracts that a lot of guys are getting at a lot of clubs, but you've got to tie guys down,
Well,
especially
yeah.
like your ruckman and your key forwards and key defenders. Your midfielders are a dime a dozen. You can get midfielders any day of the week.
Yep.
But your big keys and your big men, you got to tie them down on long-term deals because Tassie's going to come knocking soon enough.
Yep.
And if
100%.
guys are coming out of contract at the end of 26, which is only 2 years away,
Yep.
and Tassie's coming knocking on their door with big dollar offers, and we'll give you 5-6 years, a bit of superannuation or whatever else. They're going to be crazy to say no.
Yeah, geez, I'd hate to be a team rebuilding in the next couple of years. God, I hope it's not us, Port.
Yeah. Oh, look, I hear a lot of talk out of WA from the Eagles people, and they're really worried about because they're going to drop off a cliff in the next 2 years again when all their best players are over 30.
Yeah, they haven't really invested in the young talent as much. They got a couple of good young guys, but not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're going to have a crack in midfield once Elijah Hewitt gets himself on the field, and Jimby gets a bit more of a tank. Obviously, we know Harley Reid's going to be a superstar.
Yeah,
but McGovern, your distant cousin Al,
yes, yes.
Although when he gets an All-Australian jacket, you claim him as a first cousin, don't you?
Oh yeah, I'll be writing him a letter.
Yeah, McGovern, Darling, Yo's a midfielder. I mean, look, the media are trying to shop Yo around to pretty much every other club in the comp at the moment too, which is even us, which is hilarious.
Yeah, wouldn't that be ironic? Full circle.
Yeah, I can't see it happening. It's speaking of media personalities, I had a slight interaction with Tom Morris today.
Yes.
I was driving down a very crowded street in South Yarra, and I saw this white Kia coming in the other direction. Registration, no, I won't say that. And I reversed back up and pulled over to the side to let this car come through because it was a bit too narrow for us to drive past each other. I was in a much bigger vehicle as well. And anyway, he's come up, sidled up beside me, window down, and given me a bit of a wave. Thanks, mate. Good on you. And I've looked and gone, that's Tom Morris. and he did have a blonde female passenger as well. I don't think it was, no, I won't say who. No, I won't go there.
Geez, he's a controversial figure, isn't he?
Yeah, especially again, he's in the news again, having had his do we call it X or do we call it Twitter still?
I just call it Twitter.
Yeah, having his Twitter hacked.
Oh, geez, that could have gone really bad for him. I haven't heard too much about it since it happened, but that had the potential to be a disaster.
Yeah, that's But the thing was, there were players that were actually direct messaging the account, and AFLW player Collie Malloy was the one we heard the most about. But there was apparently a Richmond and a Port and one other men's player that were DMing the account saying just get out of his account and leave him alone, sort of thing.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I don't know if we'll hear more about it. Hopefully, that could be. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
There probably wasn't enough juice in his DMs for them to really get anything out of it.
Yeah, just him being left on red by a lot of list managers, I reckon. Shall we make our predictions for the game?
Yeah, then we'll get into the last couple of segments after that. So, Adam, you have the honour of going first with your prediction.
Look, I'd love to come onto your pod and really stick up for the boys and tell you that I think Port Adelaide are going to win this game. Interesting stat. Since Lachie Neale has come to the Lions have only lost one game against Port Adelaide, which was obviously round one last year.
Yeah.
The surprising thing, though, is they've only played Port Adelaide twice at Adelaide Oval in that time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that maybe they don't know how to play Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, but I just think Brisbane got their game in better order. I just think Port are really struggling with what other teams are doing to combat what they do. Denying them the corridor. I think a bit of sketchy form with some of our players. So unfortunately, I think they'll try really hard, but I think Brisbane will have the class, and I think may run out like 25-point winners.
Have you got a
Okay.
player prediction?
Play pretty like who's going to be best on ground?
Yeah, or who's going to
Or
kick a
just-
goals, or just someone that's going to do something?
Yeah, any player on either team, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll try and pick a Port player. I'll say that Finlayson will kick 3 goals.
Ooh. I could see that, to be honest. I could see that happening.
Yeah, and
We might kick 6, but he'll kick 3.
yeah. All right, Al. How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, well, I was looking at a few different things. We don't particularly play that well down there. We've come off a win. Port's come off a loss that they're probably going to be pretty fired up about, and it's at home for them, obviously. But then it's Harris Andrews' 200th game. Captain, is he going to, come out, firing and ready to go? I think. Oh, and then obviously, Butters just got off his suspension, and Finlayson's come back from his, controversial suspension and all that sort of stuff. And it could be a really fiery game overall. I don't think it's going to be a blowout either way. I think it's going to be, I'm going to say, 16-point win to us.
Yep.
And my prediction for player is Charlie's going to love being back in Adelaide, and he's going to kick 5.
Yep. Five Charlie Davidsons, and
Yeah.
not one rendition of Country Roads.
No music coming with us, apart from the club song.
So speaking of the music, apparently, according to Mike Whiting today, the Brisbane players were training with Never Tear Us Apart blaring in the background.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it does fire up opposition teams. Like it is great. I don't know if you guys have ever travelled down to Adelaide. It is an experience, and Port do pre-games quite like I've always the away supporter usually, but I reckon, and maybe it's a little bit biased, but I think Port's pre-game is as good as anyone in the competition. So if you go,
that's fair.
But I do think the Never Tear Us Apart does get opposition players up and going too. So sometimes I think it can backfire.
Yeah, they do a much better job of it with that song than what Collingwood did with Nothing Else Matters. I think that lasted 2 weeks, and nobody sang along to it because it's a really dreary song.
So when you say Port pre-game, I just think of the game a few years ago where Hinkley was interviewed pre-game and he said that he's just, we're just going to terrorise Neil, I reckon. And then that game didn't go too well.
Yeah. we sent Cam Sutcliffe to him and we started getting into him, and I think the Brisbane Lions kicked 7 goals in the first quarter to our nothing, and it was over at quarter time.
And Mitch Robinson was trying to go to the bench to bash him.
I remember that. It was, Robbo was calling him over to our bench saying, come over, let's have a chat. And after seeing what he did to Kane Pettifer not that long ago, I'm pretty sure old mate is glad he didn't take him up on that offer.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ash, your prediction?
Yeah, so Adam brought up a really good period in football for myself back in the 01 to 04 period when the rivalry was really strong between the two clubs. And so everybody talks these days about live tweeting during games. Well, I used to ring my dad during Port and Brisbane games because they were always close. They always seemed like it was 1 or 2 points in it for pretty much the whole entire game and at the end of the siren. And I'm getting a bit nostalgic about that era. I'm tipping a 1-point win to us.
Ooh.
And I am tipping Cam Rayner to have a big one, and I'm going along with Al and saying that Charlie Cameron's going to kick 3+.
I probably should have gone with 3+. That's a much more conservative and realistic goal. But I think I'm going to stick with my 5 because I'm committed to it now. I hope he has a good game.
And I think that I've got to try and remember the guy's name. So just give me a second. He's a Port player. I think Asava Radaglia is going to probably get a bunch of intercepts because that seems to happen against us a fair bit.
He's good for that stuff, isn't he?
Yeah. Like, I mean, the Cats didn't really want to let him go, and he's proven why. He's definitely come on as a footballer.
I was keen to get him because I think he was talking to us as one of the I think it was 5 clubs that he was talking to.
Yeah.
So there was a slight whisper that he was interested in coming to the Lions among a few other clubs. So obviously he settled at Port. So I was a bit disappointed by that because I would have loved to have had him at the club.
Yeah, it would have been a pretty imposing back group with him, Jack Payne, and the big chief down there as well.
Yeah, true.
But then that would also mean that our fan favourite Ryan Lester wouldn't be getting a game.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I know you're okay with it, but Ryan Lester...
No, he's had a good year, I'll admit that.
Yeah, he's another guy having a career best year. All right, well, I guess that'll do it for the football stuff. So we've got a little bit of time left to get into the fun stuff. And I did ask Adam to prepare. Now, Al, I don't know if you prepared a top 5, but I didn't make one. So
I just had my my movie and my music recommendation.
Yes. So I did ask Adam to come up with a podcast recommendation and a movie recommendation. So the ball's in your court, Adam.
Well, you've got me at a good time because outside of podcasting, I actually work in the entertainment industry.
There you go.
And so I've actually set myself a task of watching a movie a week for a year.
Wow.
And so I've actually watched a lot of movies recently because I thought I wasn't watching enough movies. I thought I was kind of, just like a footballer, just kind of like trying to switch off after game day kind of stuff. And so I wasn't, I thought I needed to watch a few more films. So for my film, now this is a bit old school, but I think it's a good one. It's stuck with me because I'm a bit like when I watch a film, I then kind of forget about it straight away. So to actually stick in my mind for a while, it needs to be something, big. Because, the only reason I remember the ending of Titanic is I know that the boat sinks. It happened in real life. So I've gone with Goodfellas, which is obviously a Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I have always I love mafia films. I love The Godfather. And then one of my mates was like, "But have you seen Goodfellas?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Well, you don't like mafia films then." And so this year, because I've had to watch so many films, I thought to myself, I've got to watch films that are a little bit of a gap in my knowledge. And I watched Goodfellas, and it is insane. It is incredible film.
Good.
It's what Martin Scorsese does as a director. Joe Pesci he's incredible. I mean, I remember him as the bad guy in Home Alone, but in this film, he was amazing. Robert De Niro at his absolute best, and then obviously Ray Liotta in his most iconic role. So
definitely.
Goodfellas is my pick.
And,
good pick, mate.
Yeah, that's some really brutal scenes in that movie as well. The one in the bar, I won't go into details because we're a family-friendly show. I
should have asked what your audience is.
Interestingly enough, our audience is generally sort of in my age bracket for the most part. So but we do have a pretty good spread, and we do have a very big female listenership. We also have we have I've been getting figures in. We've been getting some listeners in the various Asian countries where there's a lot of expat Aussies as well, Philippines, Thailand, Japan, places like that. So Yeah, very interesting seeing where the listeners come from and what their ages are. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great movie, Goodfellas. It's one that I've watched many times. Uh, what did you come up with for a pod to recommend, other than We Are the Pride, of course?
Well, that was number one, but I was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're not going to want me to. Well, I had to go with, so for the inspiration for our podcast was some NBA podcasts I listened to, and specifically the Bill Simmons podcast,
Oh,
which
yeah.
he talks about
Yeah.
American sport. But what I'm going to say, because obviously you also talk about the movie. So the Bill Simmons podcast is a great one to listen to. The Book of Basketball, if you like uh, NBA history and stuff, is a great one. And we do redrafts basically because, I love listening to the redrafts on that. But I'm actually going to go with their Rewatchables podcast. So every week they do they pick a movie that they deem to have been rewatchable, and that a movie that you'd you know listen to watch over and over again. They
Mm.
have like categories, and they go through the movie, and they decide what the best scene was, what the best line, and they just go through it, and it's just like I know Jared Waitley actually does like a version of this when they're doing their history segment, I think on Thursdays on SEN.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it's a blatant ripoff of this, and yeah. So, if you're a movie lover, if you're someone that loves movies, they've done I think about 300 pods now. I'm
Wow.
sure you can find some of the movies that you love, and you can re-listen to you can listen to a podcast about that movie.
Excellent recommendations, mate.
That's good. Yeah. Oh, well, Al, what have you got for us?
So I'll start with my movie. This one is going to be a bit left field compared to the ones I've recommended in the last few weeks.
Yep.
So it's got a big name actor in it, but it's a fairly quiet release. So it came out in 2020, um, and it didn't make a huge amount of money internationally or anything like that, and it doesn't get talked about a lot. But it's an excellent movie. So it's got Anthony Hopkins in it, and it's called The Father. Have either of you ever heard of it?
Oh, I think I've heard of it, but I definitely haven't seen it.
So it's a really interesting
No,
movie. So Anthony Hopkins is the main character, and you're kind of seeing it through his perspective. So it's set in modern day England, and he's an older man, and he's starting to develop Alzheimer's. And you're kind of seeing it through his eyes, and you're experiencing what it feels like to go through those kinds of symptoms um, through the person who's actually experiencing it. And it's it's a drama, but it's kind of scary at the same time, just for how well that they actually convey those kind of symptoms and put them across. So, for instance, some of the things that they'll do is, without spoiling it too much, they will have the same characters played by different actors in different scenes to try and he'll get confused and think that they're different people, but they're actually the same people. Um, and it starts off with he's in his apartment and his middle-aged daughter is looking after him, and then it progresses to him moving in with her, and then him moving into a retirement village in the end. And all throughout, a lot of the scenery looks exactly the same. Like he'll walk in through a different door, and it'll be like the building's changed and there's different people, but he's having the same conversation with different people and all that sort of stuff. And it's very scary, but it's very well done, and it's very it's probably one of the sadder movies I've seen, but it's just such a brilliant, unique take on a movie that I've never really experienced anything like it before. So it's called The Father. So highly recommend that to anyone. It's a very surreal experience, but if you've ever had any family members that have ever gone through something like that, which I have, and a lot of people do, it kind of gives you a new perspective on just kind of the experience that they might be going through when they're having those kind of symptoms. So fantastic movie, and Anthony Hopkins absolutely nails it.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah, brilliant movie. Highly recommend both of you checking out, and anyone listening at home as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, go
yeah,
on.
no, that was it. Just wrapping that one up there.
Yep.
But yeah, it's kind of scary, but it's a thing that's very real, and a lot of people are affected by it. Every year. So yeah, bit of a serious movie, but yeah, definitely recommend checking it out. And then so I don't have a podcast to recommend this week, Apart from Down the Guts, obviously.
Of course.
But I decided to recommend an album instead. So one of my favorite bands of all time is the Arctic Monkeys, British band. And their album AM is probably one of my go-to albums that I listen to several times a week. And I find that every time I listen to the songs, it kind of brings back different memories, and there's different parts of the songs that I resonate with, and that kind of bring back memories or experiences, or I feel them in a different way that I hadn't before. And it's just a timeless album. I think it came out in 2013, I believe. And so it's been over 10 years now, and it's just, I don't think it's one that I'll ever stop listening to anytime soon.
Yeah, back when they were still pretty good. It's like some of their early stuff, there were some absolute bangers.
All of their albums are very different from each other.
Yeah.
Like they changed their style up a lot between albums, and I think AM's probably was their peak.
And they're a band who probably were one of the first bands to really hit big from being on MySpace.
True, that's true. Yeah,
that's how they were discovered. And I remember, I bet you look good on the dance floor, and When the Sun Goes Down, they're absolute two cracking songs that I still have them on my gym playlist, my work playlist, my public transport playlist.
I listen to them basically non-stop. One of my favorite bands, definitely one of my favorite albums of all time as well. Just highly recommend.
Pretty sure it's Devon Robertson who has one of their songs as his goal celebration song as well.
Yes, I think it's "Are You Mine," which is on the AM album.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Highly recommend that one.
Yeah, that's a good nomination. That one, I'm down with that one, and definitely going to check out that movie too.
If you take anything away from either of the recommendations, the movie is I've never seen anything like it, and I don't really cry in movies much, but I was tearing up by the end of it. It was an unreal experience.
Yeah, they're the ones you never forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
he won an Oscar for it too, Anthony Hopkins.
He did. He won an Oscar for his performance. But the movie only made I think it was like 20 million or something international. Like, it did not do financially well at all, but he was recognized for his performance in that with an Oscar. So yes, highly, highly, highly recommend checking it out if you're a movie fan or a Hopkins fan, or just just looking for something that has never really, it's quite unique. It's never really been done before like that. And it really made you think about, what those people that are experiencing those symptoms are going through.
We're not contractually obliged to mention the names of any streaming services, but is it available in any of them?
Give me 1 second. I have the ability to look that up. When I originally watched it, it was through a recommendation from someone that I know, and I had to, let's say I couldn't find it on the streaming services. I had to be creative with how I found it. I'll leave it as that. But I'll see if it's, I've got an ability to search very quickly to see if it's available anywhere in the world. It's on Tubi TV apparently, which is a free streaming.
Tubi, I do have that, so that's good. And I do watch a lot of Norwegian and Swedish TV using a VPN, and we're not sponsored by the one starting with N or the one starting with S that's got a animal in it. So we're not contractually obliged to mention their names. It's actually on SBS On Demand as well. I've just seen.
Well, there you go.
I also have that. Yeah. So there you go. So I'm going to go with my podcast recommendation first.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one I listened to today for the first time, and I did not know it existed, which is very remiss of me. It's actually called On Air, Off Script, and it's run by two of our AFLW players, Jade Ellinger and Ellie Hampson.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, they're just sitting on their couches in their lounge room and just having a bit of a chin wag. The episode that I listened to today, which came out earlier this week, they were talking about the start the preseason and how tough it is. But they really went into a lot of detail as well about how, for the AFLW side of things, they because they have to work part-time in jobs as well as do a pretty heavy pre-season. They basically get to themselves about a half-hour window to spend with their friends and their families or their partners, or in the case of Jade Ellinger, her partner's in Sydney, which narrows that down even more. But yeah, really, for the Brisbane Lions fans, if you're into the AFLW scene, it's really good. I don't know when the club run podcast with, I don't know who's doing it.
It was Between the Lions, wasn't
it? Yeah, Between the Lions. I don't know who's hosting it this year, and I don't know when it's coming back. So if you're really into the AFLW space, whether you're a Brisbane fan or otherwise, but especially if you're a Brisbane fan, that's a really good one to listen to. But even if you're just a football fan, because everything they talk about is relative to no matter what level of football you're into.
Yep.
So my movie it's probably another one that's not really a big name movie, but it has a massive big name cast in it. And it's a movie from 2012. It's called Lawless.
Oh, yes. I've seen that. Yep.
Yeah, and I saw that at the drive-ins, would you believe, when it first came out. I was hanging to see it. And the Hot Rod Club that I was a member of at the time had a drive-in night. And 2012, I would have been late 30s, and I was probably about 20 years younger than this second youngest person there. But so this movie has Tom Hardy, a very young Shia LaBeouf, I think that's how you say it.
Yep.
Jessica Chastain, Mia Wasikowska, and I've said that the way that Western people say it, but me being of Eastern European origin probably should have said it properly. I think my grandma's whacking me in the back of the head from beyond the grave right now. Guy Pearce is in it, and Guy Pearce plays one of the best sleazy, slimy bad guys ever on the screen.
Yep.
I hate him so much, and I've said that so many times about so many other guys, that if you're hating the bad guy, then he's doing his job, the actor. It also has Gary Oldman in it, and it has a guy called Jason Clarke, who a lot of people will recognize his face, but maybe not his name. And I'll get back to him in a sec. So the movie's about basically a family of brothers who were really famous moonshine runners back in during the Great Depression era in the United States. Tom Hardy's character Forrest Bonderin is the main sort of character, the oldest brother. He's a World War I veteran. He's a man who can't be killed, which I won't tell you any more than that. You'll have to watch the movie.
He's like the tough one that kind of keeps everyone in line. Hey?
Yeah. He's the glue. He's the fabric of the family. Guy Pearce plays a special agent from the ATF, I think what they call it now, the Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms sort of revenue collecting people. And he's the enemy of the Bondurant family, which is the main family. Gary Oldman plays a gangster, like a Chicago style gangster. There's a lot of that sort of stuff in it. It's just it's a really well made movie, brilliantly acted by everybody in it. There's not a single person in this cast that doesn't go above and beyond their skill set. The soundtrack is amazing. Being a country boy, I don't mind a bit of bluegrass, but there's some other sort of types of country music, not your mainstream country though. It's a bit off the grid, and it's somewhat heavy for that sort of style of music. There's some brutal scenes in it that really get the hairs on the back of the neck standing up. And the final showdown scene at the end of it is just so brilliantly done, and it's expected but unexpected at the same time. And I have watched this movie so many times. So Jason Clarke's character, I'll put just a bit of last thing I'll say about it. His character name is Howard, and you see a little bit of him early on in the movie, but when he gets introduced to the Guy Pearce character, is one of the most iconic scenes in my movie watching lifetime, and I've watched thousands of movies. because like Adam, I like to watch as many movies as I can, and if I'm not talking about football or going to the gym or going to work, I'm watching movies.
Yep.
Yeah, highly recommend this movie. I think IMDb gives it a 7.2 out of 10, but I honestly give it almost a 10 out of 10.
It's very underappreciated.
Yeah, definitely. And my second oldest, who was probably 11 or 12 the first time he watched it, he just looked at it and said, "Oh, it's probably just another Western. I'm not going to watch that." And he watched it. And he can now, at the age of 15, can quote that movie from start to finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my recommendation for the week.
Beauty. Good one, fellas.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that kind of wraps us up. Unless either of you guys have got anything more you want to add?
Nothing from me. Is there anything you want to plug, Adam?
Well, I suppose actually we on this Sunday's pod we've got Josh Sin coming on the pod. So we've got an interview with him, which will be our first player interview. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's great. We've I've done a lot of work to try and get some guests on, and we've tried to get someone from our footy club. And unfortunately, that was the week that we lost to the Giants, and our podcast that week was not very pleasant. we were a little bit downbeat, so we missed out on that, and some former players and a player manager, and yeah, a few other people who have managers who want us to pay to get them on, and we don't have a gambling company paying for our show or an FM radio station, so we can't afford to pay people to come on. But yeah, big get for you guys.
Yeah, Josh Sin's awesome. I remember his draft
He's
year.
actually, yeah, we go into that. He is actually he was great. We recorded it earlier today just to show the listener. So but he was great. So it was good insight for someone like myself who never got was never close to playing AFL football. It was good to hear a player's perspective, and yeah, we talked about the draft, and we kind of went through his journey a little bit, as well as talking a little bit about Port Adelaide. So yeah, no, definitely. I'm looking forward to listening to it again when the pod comes out.
I was really hopeful that we would get him in that draft year. I really wanted, because we were looking to fill someone in that position, because he was drafted as like a halfbacker, wasn't he, when he first came in?
Yeah.
So he was one of the elite
He tells
ones.
an interesting story about that.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No. I was going to say he tells an interesting story about his draft night and maybe who was into him at the time.
Yeah. Well, I was very interested in getting him, but we ended up with Darcy Wilmot, so I'm not too upset in the end.
Yeah, can't complain about that.
He's a good player, Darcy Wilmot. He also probably had the funniest Zoom call.
Oh yeah.
when he got drafted, there was a few under 18 kids waving bowls of beer around and stuff like that. It was pretty funny.
And he pops up with the Pepsi Max.
Yeah, he'll never forget that one.
Yeah. So just before we wrap up, I just want to say, so our listenership, their favorite co-host that we have from time to time, Deb, who she's been getting a little bit of fan mail from the male listenership as well. I might have to fight them off, but that's another story. Deb and I are actually working on something else that we're going to be putting on air soon in the podcasting space. It's completely not football related.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm just going to put something out there. So keep an eye on our socials and keep listening, because there will be a pretty big announcement made pretty soon. It's in the very, very, very infant stages at the moment. But me being me, I had a logo designed about 6 months before I even came up with the I have access to some high school visual communication students who are very good at designing things, and they've designed our new logo that we've been running with for a few weeks. And also the logo I use from the Fitzroy branch of the podcast. I had a guy say to me today that he wants to use that logo for his next tattoo. So that's
Wow.
that's something a bit different.
That's
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah, and I pointed out to him, well, that was designed by a 13-year-old in year 8 in high school. He was mightily impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might have to up our game with our logos then. It seems like you've taken it to another level.
No, I look, your logo I really like. It tells the story of what your show's about. It's about football.
Yep.
And I
Very
hope you
simple.
I hope you don't mind. I've pinched it. I'm going to stick it on our thumbnail for this episode so people can get a feel for you being on the show as well, Adam. May or may not have a pair of hanging boxing gloves in between the two logos.
No, it sounds good. Promote away. I've actually really enjoyed being on this pod. This has been great. I know I'm a bit of a talker, so it's been a long pod,
fit
but
in here.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, look, that's how Al and I got into this. We've been mates for about probably 7 years, and we're just constantly messaging each other with trade scenarios, draft scenarios, selection scenarios, reviewing games on Facebook Messenger, and I just grand final day last year. I did I shot a lot of footage on my trusty iPhone, and I put something together for YouTube after the grand final, and I got some pretty good feedback, and I started doing something on my own for a couple of episodes, and I thought, I got this bloke who knows his footy and loves talking about it, and that's all we ever do anyway. Why isn't he on here? And well, here we are. Yep. We I think this is our 34th or 5th episode for the year. So
oh wow. Yeah, geez, we pump him out.
Jeez.
Yeah, look, I think about. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, our wives, I don't think let us record in January. I think we only started up recording end of February. We had to give it a break for a little bit over the summer. I think our wives wanted us back for a little bit, but we're very similar to you guys. Like we know each other through through my wife is how we met and had a lot of common interests, and the text started flying about football, and one golf day we decided to do a podcast together, and here we are.
And here you are. Well, we're so glad to have you on. I mean, you're the first guest we've had on that isn't just another Lions nuffy that we know personally. So
yeah,
we were really excited to get you on, and the fact that you were able to stay on for as long as you have, all the way through to the end for us, which we're famous for very long episodes. We appreciate you keeping up with our waffle that we have.
No, much appreciated. I enjoyed it.
And yeah, I do listen to every episode since I started listening to Down the Guts. I haven't missed an episode, and I've started listening to some back episodes as well. I do love your tier system that you do. That's it's so much more honest than what you get in the mainstream media.
Although I think I dropped Brisbane off because I thought they weren't going to make finals, and now I'm going to have to bring them back in because as of last week's episode, we worked out that they might be like 5th.
I gave you a bake a couple of episodes ago, but it was all in good spirits.
Okay.
Yeah,
no, rightfully so. You got to. Yeah, you got to keep me accountable. If I talk nonsense, you got to keep me accountable.
That's all good. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, mate. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can, if possible, we can get Joe on before we play Adelaide. We'll see how that goes, I guess, and maybe have a chat to you again around maybe the finals bye or end of postseason as well.
Anytime.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks for coming on. And yeah, so for the listeners as well, if you haven't listened to Down the Guts, they're available. I listen to them on Spotify, and you can find them in pretty much anywhere on social media. They're really hardworking guys, Instagram, Facebook, and so forth. There's probably the main ones that everyone uses. So get on their pages, give them a follow and a like, and go and listen to their pod. It's really, really good. And that'll do me for the night.
It's great to meet you, Adam.
No, thank you for having me on. Sorry if I talked over you guys a couple of times, but
Oh no,
so
not
I'm
at all.
still
Man.
getting used to this Zoom thing.
No, we do it all the time, mate.
But
we,
no,
yeah.
Beauty.
no, it's really good. Cool.
No worries.
Well, no, hopefully this isn't the last time we speak, and
No, definitely not.
maybe we'll make sure hopefully the best team wins on Saturday.
That's
Yeah, the best Brisbane-based team.
Well, that might be the case.
Yeah, no, look, I'm just hoping for a good game, and
Yeah, that's it.
And we don't want a repeat of the St Kilda Gold Coast game the other week. That's for sure.
Yeah, none of that, please.
Yeah. No.
All right, lads.
I'm working, so
Yep.
no, I was just going to say I'm working, so good or bad, I can at least either watch or not watch. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll be watching on TV. So on KO. So all right, well, thanks guys for tonight, and good luck to our respective footy teams on the weekend.
That's it.
No
See you,
worries.
fellas.
All right, have a good one, boys.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey Freya, guess what?
What, Ash?
We've got a Patreon now.
What's a Patreon?
I'm glad you asked. Patreon is a website we have started using to promote our extra content, such as those really long tangents that our listeners love, but are not quite on topic for a particular episode. So we need somewhere else to put them so people can still listen. We might also have some fun competitions, giveaways, and other fun interactions for our listeners to join in with.
Sounds great. How do the listeners get on board?
Go into patreon.com and click on the join link. All you need to do for a fan account is add your name and email address, and then search for We Are the Pride Brisbane Lions podcast and give us a follow. We aren't asking for your money. It's free.
Sounds great, champ. I'm heading to patreon.com right now.
Damn, Freya. I can't believe you champed me.
This episode was produced by Steel Hat Productions. Please follow us and enable notifications to get our latest episodes anywhere podcasts are available. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review.